Doug from Global West, and I thought I'd show you about one of our new products, especially for the 64 to 72 A bodies, which will be your Chevelles, GTO, Le Mans, Buick GS, Cutlass, 442s. There's actually quite a list. And what this involves is this extended travel system is now for the coilovers. So I have both control arms here, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the differences between the two and explain what we have going on. So Coilover, for example, has been around now for some time, and we built a tubular control arm for the coilover system. It's been our part number has been a CTA 42H. And what it is, it's this particular control arm right here. And this particular control arm, as you can see right here, I want to show you a couple features about it, is it's got a doubler plate right in here. This is where the shock would normally bolt. Now, we designed this control arm to simulate the stock lower control arm. The companies that are producing the coilover system say that you can bolt the coilover to the top of the stock lower control arm and set it up that way. Well, we build a tubular arm, and what we want to do is we want to add additional support to help support the weight of the vehicle. And so you'll see doubler plates and stuff of this nature. Now, I want you to show you something else, is if you'll notice that this particular control arm is pretty flat on the bottom. You don't have a spring pocket dropping down there. Well, the shock mount location that we have here is identical to stock. And when we do a coilover system, that coilover shock absorber is going to bolt to the top of your lower control arm, not from underneath. So what we ran across is a lot of people want to lower their cars down a lot further than 1 1/4 inches, like 1 1/2 or 1 3/4, 2. And they're trying to do it in the shock absorber. And what we're going to show you is that's going to be a little bit difficult to do. Now, before we get to that point, I'm going to show you this new control arm, and this is called an extended travel. And let me show you this real quick. We've changed the design, and you notice the base isn't flat anymore. We've got these pickup points that drop down lower, below the control arm, and it's going to take a shock like this. We're not going to have the T-bar anymore. Well, the T-bar is an easy thing to press out, and we give you these dowels that press back in, and you could change your shock over to this application with no trouble at all. But the main thing we want to show is the drop. Now, you probably already got it figured out. Well, if we lower this pickup point for the shock, we've extended the travel of the shock absorber, especially in a lowered condition. And you're absolutely right. So we call these EXTs. So the part number for this is a CTA 42 EXT. We recommend these arms for anybody going below 1 1/4 inches and they're trying to do it in a coilover. Now, a lot of guys will say, well, I'll just put a 2-inch drop spindle on it. Well, you can. 2-inch drop spindles, though, do have limitations. One of the limitations you have in a 2-inch drop spindle is you're limited on the backspace of your rim. So generally what you have to do is go to an 18-inch wheel in order to get past the tie rod end for getting a decent size tire on the front. So backspace is how far the rim goes in from where it bolts on to the rotor assembly. And that tie rod end on a 2-inch drop stays in the stock position, only the center line of the wheel has moved up. The pin for the rotor and the assembly. It's moved up 2 inches, and so that distance has been lost there. So 15-inch wheels, 16, 17, if you have the wrong backspace on that rim and you're running a 2-inch drop spindle, your tie rod end assembly is going to run right into the rim and tire. And so it really limits you. You've got to go to an 18. So how do we get around that? Well, you could do it through the control arms, right? Do a 1 3/4, 2, whatever. You can do that. But if you do it in a coilover application, what happens is you can run out of travel. And so these EXTs that we've designed allow you to get down to that ride height and still maintain suspension travel. And you're not having to deal with rim offsets and whether it hits whether the tie rod end is going to hit the tire or what have you, or having to run an 18-inch wheel. So we have our frame here. We have a display frame, a Chevelle display frame, that we're actually going to assemble these on, and we're going to show you about shock travel between the two different control arms and why you want to use an extended travel versus a non-extended. And it all has to deal with how low you want to lower that car. So we're going to take a minute here and assemble these, throw them on the display, and we're going to show you. Okay. And let me go ahead and throw this together real quick. Okay. So what we're going to check here is you're going to look inside here and you're going to see how much shock travel that we're dealing with. So let's get positioned and we'll show you. Okay, so you can see right now that we've got everything set up. This is, we've got the coilover shock mounted at this point, and you can see up inside here how much shock travel we have. Now this is a standard system. This is not a shortened shock. This is the shock that's called for your vehicle. Let me show you what's going on here. So we're going to put the tape measure up inside here, and if you'll notice, the amount of shock travel we have is approximately 2.5 inches. Well, 2.5 inches at the shock is about 5 inches at the tire. I'm in a full droop application, which means the tire's hanging out of the fender. Now, I was talking earlier about 64 through 7 frames and the bump stop. Now, like I say, this frame doesn't have the bump stop. Check this out. I'm going to go to a full bump application. All the way up. Look at here. The bump stop on the control arm is not hitting the frame. Now it normally would if the factory had the bump stop there, the plate, but it's not. And the shock is bottomed out, which basically means if you bottom this, all the load is going to go through your mounts right through here. Now if you're running a stock lower control arm, you don't have a lot of material there to handle that type of weight. Now on one of our control arms, for example, with the doublers and everything, we can take the abuse. But the point is the shock is taking all this brunt. It's bottomed out. And it's because the frame doesn't have the bump stop, where normally it'd be hitting this. Now granted, you got to be really low at this point, but the point of the matter is you ran out of shock travel. So now if I was to install this, which was supposed to be there to begin with from the factory, we'll show you the difference. Okay, you can see we've gone ahead and installed the bump stop now. So looking at this same situation where the suspension travels all the way up, the bump stop is now hitting properly, and I still haven't bottomed the shock out. I still got another 1/4 inch yet. Yeah, it's tight, but I'm still not bottoming the shock out. So I'm going to lower this back down here, and as you can see how much travel there is. Okay, so when we do the recommendation with this particular system is going to be 1 1/4 drop. We don't recommend anymore, and we run into this situation. I have people calling us on a regular basis for tech assistance on why their coilover has a harsh ride. And there's a couple reasons for it. If they're lowering this down in a system like this below 1 1/4 inches, as you can see with the shock travel that we just demonstrated, they can run out of shock travel in a heartbeat, and they can bottom the system out. Or the guy who sold them the system originally knew that they were going to go super low or lower than 1 1/4, and actually gave them a spring rate that was high enough to accommodate that, which also was going to affect the ride. So a lot of times we'll get a situation where I got a coilover and I thought it was going to give me a better ride, but I actually have a harsh ride. Well, it's going to be one of the two scenarios. Either he's got the spring rate cranked up because he wants to drop the car so low, or he has a softer spring, but he's bottoming the car out. One way or another, this is going to take place. So, you know, there's kind of a myth about also, well, if I put coilovers, it's going to be a soft ride or whatever the case is. The car doesn't know the difference. A spring is a spring, a shock is a shock. The coilover gives you the adjustability of ride height. It gives some other features too as well for like weight jacking and road racing environments or drag racing or racing in general. But at the end of the day, the shock sees the spring rate and it sees the shock valve. It doesn't care if it's a coilover or a standard system at all. So just understand that that myth about if I put a coilover on it, I'm going to have a better ride has really nothing to do with it at all. It's what spring rates you use and how you adjust the shock is what's going to make the difference or not. So in this particular application, which is set up for a standard type lower control arm, 1 1/4 drop is pretty much the rule of thumb. If you're going to go past that, this is not the package for you. We have something for you. That's why we call them extended travels. But this particular scenario here, just what we've showed you, explains why you can get into trouble. So be aware when you're dealing with coilover how low you want to go, and then adjust your componentry accordingly. So let me show you what an extended travel system is and why we built it, and it's because of this situation. Okay, we've got our display set up here. We've got our lower control arm on the display. We're ready to show you what's going on here. And I'm going to go ahead and install the shock absorber on the extended travel lower control arm. And this installs a little bit differently. We don't have the T-bar where the bolts drop down through. This has got an eyelet, and we have a through bolt. And so basically we give you all these pieces, by the way. We give you the new hardware, and we give you the spacer that goes in the shock. So if you do have a T-bar and you want to convert over to the extended travel system, we give you the parts to get the job done. So it's not going to be an issue. So let me go ahead and install this real quick. Okay, we've got the extended travel system all together here. As you can see, we've got the shock installed and everything is ready to go. And we've got our window here so you can see what we've got going on. Now, it's in a full droop application. Now, one thing we want to show you here is on the upper control arm, we actually changed the bump stop out as well. This is what originally was on our control arm, and now we're going to a longer one. Now we do have it in red, but in reality they'll be shipped out in black. But this is one good way so you can see the differences in reference height of the bump stop. Now the reason why we did that is because the shock is lowered, and so going in a droop situation, which means the tires coming out of the fender, we don't want the shock to be the limiting factor. We want the bump stop to be the limiting factor. So obviously we have to increase the bump stop length just before the shock bottoms out. And so that's exactly what we did. Now looking up inside here, you can see the shock travel and what have you. Now here's what's really unique. Remember on the other side we were talking about the bump stop. This particular frame does not have the factory bump stop that comes all the way down. And we deliberately have it off on this side because we're going to show you something. This is designed for cars that are going to be 1 1/4 inches to 2 inches. In fact, you can even go past 2 in reference to lowering the vehicle. Okay? And let me show you something. I'm going to go ahead and cycle this up. And if you'll notice, I'm all the way up, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but the bump stop is hitting the frame, and my shock still has over a 1/2 inch of travel, which basically means this here, you can see the differences where the other side in the standard configuration with the bump stop, I ran into a problem where the shock was already close to bottoming out and I wasn't as low. Where here, with the shock travel being moved down in the lower control arm here, extended travel, we've increased the amount of shock travel available before the shock will bottom out and allowed us to go that much further in reference to our suspension travel. So the beauty of this system is that now you can operate with a fairly soft spring or a standard spring at a lowered ride height, not have a bottoming condition. So I don't need to run the high spring rates anymore. And so you can have a decent ride. Now, if you want to go racing or whatever you want to do there, yeah, we get the spring rates for it. We can crank it up. You have adjustable ride height, and you have all this advantage. Now, one thing that will happen is you'll never be able to go back to stock ride height with this setup. Because in that particular instance, you would run out of shock travel, not in bump, but in rebound. That's where the shock comes out. You're going to be limiting how much travel you have there. So this system is good for 1 1/4 on for lowering, where the other system is good from stock height down to 1 1/4. But that's why we build these extended travels. Okay, so in recap, between extended travel and our standard coilover system. The standard CTA 42H for Chevelle, 64 through 72, and this is A bodies, GTO, GS, 442s, okay? All the A bodies. The standard one, which is a CTA 42H, will take from stock height down to 1¼ inches. And that's pretty much it. I would not recommend going further than that based on the shock travel that we just showed you. If you want to go further than that, then I would definitely run the 42 EXT. That's what it's designed for. It's for from 1¼ down. The nice thing about it is you can run your standard springs, you know, the softer rate without going to the high spring rate, so you don't have the harsh rides. You still get the lower look. You don't have to deal with a 2-inch drop spindle, dealing with what rim offset can I fit. I want to run 15s, but I want to run a bigger 15, but it hits the tie rod end, or whatever the case is. You eliminate a lot of issues. And you still have the adjustability for anywhere in that range. After 1¼ going up, probably not. I wouldn't do that. Now what you can do is, let's say, you know, you got the extended travels on there and like, you know, hey, you know what? I do want to go back to stock ride height for whatever reason. Who really knows? All you're going to have to deal with is buying a longer shock absorber. Doing a longer coilover shock, we can install that instead, and you can get your ride height. It's all about shock travel at the end of the day. That's really what it's all about here. So anything is possible with the right components. So give us a call. We'll be glad to help you out.